Sometimes you're entire because of one me. Not a breakup, not bad enough. Just three ordinary words. Can we talk? Your thumb freezes. Your heart speeds up. And before you've read another word, your mind has Al. They're upset. I must have done. This isn't going to end. 10 minutes later, you're sending a reply. You sound familiar? Here's the strange part. If that same message had appeared on your best friend's phone instead of yours, you'd probably smile and say, "Don't panic, it could mean anything." So why is wisdom so easy to find for someone else, and so difficult to reach for ourselves? Most of us spend years believing the answer is simple. I need more discipline. I need better emotional control. I just have to stop overreacting. But what if you've been trying to solve the wrong problem? What if the issue isn't that you don't know what to do, but that your mind loses access to its best advice precisely when emotions become loud? That isn't just an interesting idea. It changes how you think about every argument, every impulsive decision, every sleepless night replaying a conversation that may not even matter tomorrow. Because if knowledge were the answer, most of us would already be emotionally healthy. We've read the books, saved the quotes, watched the videos, shared the advice, and yet, when life presses on exactly the right emotional bruise, all that wisdom suddenly feels impossibly far away. Not gone, just out of reach. That's the part almost nobody explains, and once you see it, you may never blame yourself in quite the same way again. Imagine walking through a city you know by heart. Every street feels familiar. You don't even think about where you're going. Then suddenly, without warning, the entire city goes dark. The buildings are still there. The roads haven't disappeared. Nothing has actually changed. Except one thing. You can no longer see the path that always felt obvious. Our emotional lives work in surprisingly similar ways. The knowledge doesn't disappear. The map doesn't disappear. Access changes. And that tiny difference is where today's story begins. Think about the last time you overreacted. Maybe it wasn't even a big moment. A delayed reply, a short email, a strange look across the room. Somehow, those tiny moments can feel enormous. Not because they're objectively dangerous, but because your brain isn't built to wait comfortably inside uncertainty. Long before you consciously understand what's happening, your mind starts asking one question. What does this mean? The problem is, when information is missing, the brain rarely leaves the page blank. It fills in the empty spaces, usually with the story that feels safest to prepare for. And strangely enough, the safest story is often the scariest one. If someone doesn't answer your message, maybe they're busy, maybe their phone died, maybe they simply forgot. But your mind quietly whispers, they're pulling away. Not because it's trying to hurt you, because it's trying to protect you. False alarm costs very little. Missing a real threat could cost much more. For thousands of years, that strategy helped humans survive. The difficulty is that modern life is filled with emotional uncertainty rather than physical danger. Your brain often responds to both with surprisingly similar urgency. That's why knowing better isn't always enough. Imagine opening your laptop. Every file you've ever saved is still there. Every photo, every document, every memory. Nothing has been deleted, but suddenly the search bar stops working. The information still exists. You just can't reach it quickly. That's what emotional overwhelm often feels like. Your wisdom isn't gone. Your access is simply interrupted. And once you understand that, something important changes. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What can I make easier to reach?" That question leads us somewhere most advice never goes. Because almost every self-improvement system assumes you'll think clearly first and act wisely second. Real life usually happens in the opposite order. You react first, then your mind rushes in to explain why. So instead of designing a perfect response, design the smallest possible first step. Not 10 steps, not a morning routine, not a motivational speech, just one action your future self can still remember while emotionally overwhelmed. Psychologists call one version of this an implementation intention, but you don't need to remember the term, only the principle. Decide before the moment, so you don't have to negotiate during the moment. Maybe your rule is simple. If I notice my shoulders tightening, I won't reply for 10 minutes. Or, if I feel rejected, I'll ask one question before I make one assumption. Notice what's happening here. You're not controlling your emotions. You're protecting your decisions from your emotions. Those are two completely different goals. And that difference changes everything. Because emotional resilience doesn't begin when you finally feel calm. It begins the moment you create enough space for a different choice to become possible. Now let's go back to where we began. Your phone lights up. The same message appears. Can we talk? Nothing has changed. The uncertainty is still there. Your stomach still tightens. Your imagination still races ahead. The difference isn't that you've become calmer. The difference is that you've prepared for this moment before it arrived. Instead of reaching for the perfect answer, you reach for your default. You notice your feet touching the ground. You let one slow breath leave your body. Then you quietly tell yourself, I don't have enough information yet. That's all. Not because those words make anxiety disappear. They won't. Not because they guarantee everything will be okay. They can't. They simply stop your imagination from making the next decision for you. A few minutes later, another message appears. I just wanted to ask if you're free this weekend. And suddenly, the disaster your mind had been rehearsing never existed outside your own imagination. We've all lived moments like this. Sometimes the conversation really is difficult. Sometimes the relationship does end. Sometimes the fear turns out to be justified. This isn't about pretending bad things never happen. It's about refusing to suffer twice. Once in imagination, and once in reality. Because the truth is, our minds are extraordinary prediction machines. Prediction keeps us alive, but prediction is not the same thing as truth. Learning that distinction might be one of the most valuable emotional skills you'll ever develop. The strongest people aren't those who never feel fear. They're the ones who recognize when fear has quietly started writing a story, and instead of believing every sentence, they wait, just long enough for reality to speak. Maybe emotional resilience has never been about controlling your mind. Maybe it's about becoming curious before becoming certain, about choosing observation before conclusion, about remembering one small action instead of trying to remember 100 pieces of advice. So the next time life gives you a moment that feels overwhelming, don't ask, how do I stop feeling this? Ask, what's the first thing I already decided to do? One breath, one pause, one question, one choice. Sometimes, that's all the space a wiser version of you needs to step back into the conversation. If this video gave you a new way to understand your own mind, you'll probably enjoy the next one, where we'll explore why overthinking isn't really about thinking too much. It's about trying to solve uncertainty. Until then, be kind to your mind. It's been trying to keep you safe your entire life. It just isn't always very good at telling the difference between uncertainty and danger.